What is going on, guys? Jim Surratt, Hammer Strength and Conditioning, coming at you today. I want to talk today about the application of accommodating resistance in training, whether powerlifting, strength and conditioning, sports performance, tactical performance, whatever it is, right? I'm not going to get super nuancy with this because I could sit here and get super nerdy about it and talk circles around myself. So I'm going to try to keep this, that's the key word there, try. I'm going to try to keep this very simple. So accommodating resistance is at its core the utilization of, or the application or addition of either bands or chains, or sometimes both, to a lift. Okay, so let's talk bands. I think I'm gonna try to keep this very simple and very precise and keep myself from rambling. So bands are elastic in nature, right? Bands stretch, you get tension as the band stretches, as the band lengthens. The tension on that band increases, and that's how we get the resistance that we use for lifting, right? Chains weigh a certain amount, right? And as chains come off the floor, each link adds weight to the bar, and that's how you get the resistance from the chains. Very simple, right? Okay, so bands are elastic in nature, again, and because of that, have what I consider to be an exponential loading profile, meaning their tension increases very rapidly, right? It's a very vertical path. Whereas chains, because they are not elastic, they are static, right? Have a much more much more subtle, sort of incremental loading profile, right? So instead of doing this like bands do, chains kind of go like this, right? Much less aggressive slope. So bands are measured in pounds, as are chains, right? Now, my opinion on band poundage is that it doesn't really matter, right? Because bands can be so variable even within the same category of band, right? So bands are typically broken into micros, minis, monsters, lights, averages, and strongs, and then there's mammoths, right? And each band category has a certain tension profile, right? Or tension range, depending on how far it's stretched, how it's hooked up, all this kind of stuff, right? I don't really think any of that matters too much. The way that I utilize bands for both my athletes, my lifters, and myself is that do I want some, or like a little bit, some, or a lot of tension? So I make that decision. Let's say I want just some tension, right? My next question is then, what is the strength level of the athlete and what is his or her skill level? If they're very strong and very proficient, we'll use a heavier band than we would use if they were not as strong and or not as proficient, right? So if we're benching, for me, I would use doubled minis. That's what my skill level and my strength level specifically allows me to use successfully. Somebody else who's just starting off, who doesn't have as high of a strength level or high of a skill level, would use either doubled micros or would use choked micros. Okay? So band is measured in tension or in poundages, right? Usually with a range, like a right and a left limit, a bottom and a top range. And are very useful for speed work. Because they're elastic, you have to accelerate. You have to beat the band. If you go slow through a band, you might be able to grind it out and finish the lift successfully. Chances are you're not going to. If you hit a sticking point or a stopping point against bands, because bands want to return to their natural shape, it's gonna pull you back down and you're gonna fail the lift, right? So bands teach you to accelerate. So bands are great for rate of force development. Chains are measured in pounds, straight up, right? So each chain weighs about 20 pounds, plus or minus, right? And they're about 5 to 6 feet in length, depending on the cut, right? So the way chains work is just like bands. As the chain extends, more links come off the floor, the weight increases. As the chain goes down, more links go on the floor, the weight decreases. However, where bands are exponential and dynamic, chains are incremental and static, right? So chains do not want to return to their natural shape. There is no impulse within the chain no animus, right, to return to its natural shape, whereas bands want to. So bands are eccentrically overloading you, and chains are just there, right? So chains are really good for strength work, and these are very binary, black and white, very simplistic observations and statements, right? We can get super nuancey with both aspects. Maybe I will at some point. I don't want to do that today, right? So bands, good for speed. Chains, good for strength. Very simple, okay? So How do I choose how much band tension? Well, again, I talked about that, right? Do I want a little bit, some, or a lot? And then what's my skill level, what's my strength level? What's my movement pattern, right? So the amount of band tension I'm gonna choose, or the bands I'm gonna choose for my squat are gonna be different than the bands I choose for my bench press or my deadlift, right? How do I set my bands up? Well, funny you should ask. We can talk about that, okay? Let's go on a little trip. All right, so I'm gonna take you through a little tour of the facility here. Ta-da! All right, so I have a rack set up there, okay? And we're going to demonstrate how to set up band tension for a squat. Okay, so this is a very simplistic approach, okay? I would probably not use this particular setup with an actual lifter, but this is the short and skinny version of how to do it, right? So, what is that? Oh. So the way my racks work is I have the bottom rail, structural rail, and then I have an adjustable safety pin, right? So there's two ways you can set up bands with racks. Either you have band pegs that go into that bottom rail, okay? You set them up X amount of distance apart, depending on how much tension you want, loop it around, choke it through, and put it up. I'm not gonna do that because I don't want to. We are gonna do it the simple way. So we're gonna take the band, we're gonna feed it under the bottom rail, and then we're gonna choke it right at that pin. So the pin is our, sort of our catch point, and we put the band up over the barbell. Ta-da! We just set up bands for a squat. Okay, so I believe that the further you set this up, so the further up the pin goes, the more tension, the more tension you're gonna have here, right? And this is the tension that matters. Tension here doesn't matter, right? This is what's doing the work. Okay, so you would set that up obviously on both sides, right? Please don't try to squat with just one side banded. You will be in for a bad time. Okay, so that's how you set up bands for a squat. That's super simple, right? Now, for a deadlift, or excuse me, for a bench press, same thing. Except, instead of choking the band around the pin and using your pin as your, sort of your leverage point, you just double the band, and then if my barbell was down here, I would take this band and I would choke it up over the barbell so that both strands, so hence doubling, because I have two ends of the band over top of the barbell. Voila! That is how to set up bands for squat and bench press. I'm not gonna do it for deadlift because I'm lazy and I don't wanna do that right now. You can also go reverse band, which I'll just show really quick because I'm here. So reverse band is super simple. Take the band, choke it around. Ta-da! Voila! Reverse band. So bands can be used for both resistance and assistance, right? So because of their elastic nature, you just inverted the band, and the band wants to return to its natural shape, which is now going this way as compared to that way. So the band wants to pull you up as compared to pull you down. So bands can be used for reverse overload stuff, whether benching, squatting, deadlifting, whatever, right? You can use bands to assist you out of the bottom position. With the bands in reverse style, reverse cowgirl, that was terrible, I'm so sorry. There's more weight at the bottom of the band, or the bottom of the rep, than there is at the top, because of the nature of the band. So bands are useful for overload by helping you get out of the hole on a squat, a bench, or a deadlift. And then you can set them up so that you have little to no tension at the very top of the rep so that you are feeling the full effect of the weight at the top of the repetition. Okay? So that's bands. Super simple, right? Not at all. Super complicated. Real huge pain in the ass. Hate bands. Love bands, hate bands. Okay? Next thing I'm gonna talk about is how to set up chains. So chains are very simple, right? But, like with everything, I don't know where my camera's pointed. I don't know how much you can see of me. Chains are very simple, but like everything, can get very nuanced and very complicated already, or very quickly. Okay? So chains are very simple to set up. So you have a smaller, shorter feeder chain, okay? This is what goes around the barbell. So if I'm setting up for squat, I'm gonna put my feeder chain around the end of the barbell. Chain stays on the bar the whole time. And then I take my weighted chain and I clip it around the feeder chain. Voila, you have set up chains. Congratulations. Okay, now, Jim, what if I have a shorter lifter and I want more chain? Funny you should ask. Okay, you can take this little guy right here, adjust it so the feeder chain is shorter, right? So one tactic that I like to use, actually very, very seriously, is I will take, I'll take 2 different feeder chains and put 2 different feeder chain lengths on the barbell. So I'll have a certain amount of weight, of chain weight. So let me back up. So with chains, you want a few links dragging on the floor for stability, right? Because if the chain is up off the ground entirely, it's gonna swing freely and becomes very unstable and becomes actually unsafe. But if you want more chain, right, at the top of a rep, what you can do is use 2 different feeder chains, or you can use like the Easy Loader straps from Elite FTS or from Spud Inc. And you can set it up so that you have the majority of your chain higher on the barbell, so more chain off the floor, and you can have just 1 link on the floor for stability. So let's say I'm squatting against 120 pounds of chain. That's 3 links per side, okay? If I want 100 pounds for sure off the floor, if I know I want 100 pounds of weight at the top, I'm going to make sure that 80. Yeah, if I want 80 pounds of chain at the top, sorry, I had to do math. If I want 80 pounds of weight at the top of my repetition, I'm gonna make sure that that 80 pounds is off the floor at the very top. But I still need weight at the bottom for stability. So I'm gonna take the other 40 pounds of chain and I'm gonna let it drag just enough, like a couple, 3 links, so there's stability at the bottom of the rep. So I use 2 different feeder length straps, or feeder chain lengths, excuse me. I'm starting to get ahead of myself. So I use 2 different feeder chain lengths, or I'll use a Easy Loader strap from Elite FTS or from Spud Inc. And set my chains different heights, okay? So bench press and squat, same setup, okay? If you're floor pressing with chain, Jesus, that scared the crap out of me. My door just slammed. The wind, right? If you're floor pressing, just take the feeder chain off, loop the chain itself over the end of the barbell, voila. If you are deadlifting, same setup. Take the feeder chain off, feed the barbell through the chain, so that the chain is directly in contact with the barbell on the inside of the barbell, right? So if you're sumo, it's gonna go right in the middle. If you're a conventional puller, it's outside your legs, outside your hands. Ta-da, you have chains, okay? There's no such thing as a reverse chain. Imagine that. You can squat into chain at different heights. That's something differently entirely that I'm not gonna talk about. But yeah, so that's how to set up bands and chains, okay? I know I'm super sarcastic right now and super kind of, I don't know what I'm trying to say I am right now, but dismissive? Anyway, that's how to set up bands and chains. Again, bands are super useful for speed work, okay? Acceleration, strength, speed, strength, like true explosive strength, that kind of stuff. And then you can pick different band tensions for what you're trying to train. If you want more strength speed, pick a heavier band. If you want a more speed strength focused or oriented stimulus, lighter band. If you want true explosive strength, even lighter band. Because each category or each point along that strength speed continuum has different requirements for stimulus, right? Chains, very useful for strength. The more chain you have, the heavier it gets. Chains are really simple, okay? So that's it for today. This is actually round 2 of trying to do this video because the first time I just rambled for 30 minutes and I said, I'm not doing this, but here we are. So if you have any questions, shoot me a DM, shoot me a message. Please like, comment, like, comment, subscribe, share, all that kind of stuff. You can email me, hammersandc@gmail.com. Check out my website, www.hammersandc.com, or find me on Instagram @hammersnc. Thanks for checking things out, and as always, don't waste the pain.